Hey everyone, welcome back to Barter Hordes. My name is Robert. Happy Friday, although I'm actually filming this Thursday afternoon. I had some things I had to do anyway. I just thought, I'm not sure I'll have time tomorrow, so I'll just film it now and schedule it for tomorrow. As you saw in my thumbnail, not very artistic, but I'm wearing my politics season t-shirt, Any Functioning Adult 2020. We're down to 3 ancient white dudes. That's all that we have left. 2 in one party, 1 in the other party. So who knows where this country's going, but it's another reason for young people to think that voting is irrelevant. And that's been the trend. And as long as that continues, we're screwed. Anyway, I've had a good reading week. I finished 4 books. I have 3 on the go, so I'll go through those quickly. I don't have any updates on music or movies this week because one of these books actually sent me off onto a binge watch of a television series, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And so I've been watching that instead of watching movies. The first book I finished is a 2019 Canadian novel that is one of the BookTube Prize long list titles, and that is The Innocents by Michael Crummey. I came into this book knowing 0 about the story ahead of time. I knew it had gotten a little bit of buzz in Canadian literature discussions, but not much beyond that. And I was so pleased with this book. I just thought it was very, very good. The story is pretty simple. You have 2 siblings, boy and a girl, who are probably late adolescents, early teenagers, when one winter, they live in a very remote cove in Newfoundland, Canada, and one winter, a particularly terrible virus, kind of topical right now, in short order killed their infant sister, their mother, and then their father, leaving the 2 children not knowing anything other than what they've learned in their short 12 or 13 years from their parents. They have 0 contact with other people. The only other person they've ever really had contact with is the midwife who came from a not too far away village to give birth, to help the mother give birth. But they don't have any way of contacting her. They're not even sure exactly how to get to the village that she comes from. So they are really isolated and on their own. And so this book is about their coming of age, their journey towards becoming self-sufficient and surviving really harsh winters, learning how to make the fishing trade work for them the way their father had worked the system. Is there is a ship that comes and docks, it anchors outside the cove twice a year, spring and fall, and they sell their catch to the ship in exchange for credit on supplies for the coming winter and so on. And they never seem to get ahead. They're always in debt, it seems like. But the book is also about a couple of the people who they meet by chance over the course of the years and how that changes their lives as well. I'm not going to say any more than that because to do so would probably be too much of a spoiler. But it's really well done. I'm so impressed with this novel. I understand that he has several other novels out too, and so I'm going to start looking for some of those over the next couple of months. But this one I really was completely taken with and didn't expect anything from it because I had not heard anything about it. So be on the lookout for that one. I think The Innocents has some staying power. The next one I finished is a collection of essays, Thick by Tressie, McMillan, Cottom. I wrote a pretty long review on Goodreads of this one because I had some real problems with it as an argument, and she sets it up in the first essay as a series of essays that are classical arguments, not personal essays. And so I read it that way, and I think it suffers under that kind of a microscope. I don't think it's a good piece of argumentation. But I'll tell you right now that everybody loves this book. It's got a very high rating on Goodreads. People that I've heard talk about it on BookTube absolutely think it's the best. And it just irritated me from start to finish because of some argumentative things that the author does that are just poor rhetoric, poor quality choices for arguments that I think end up undercutting what are points that I would have agreed with if a more reasonable approach had been taken to it. And she's constantly boasting about how reasonable she is and how good she is at all these different topics. At some point, she starts to sound a little bit like Trump trying to convince you that he's a very stable genius. And I think the more she has to make that claim for herself, the more it undercuts the fact that her arguments don't hold up to scrutiny, which is a shame because I think in terms of her agenda, I'm probably on board with the vast majority of it, but she gets there by such unfair argumentative means that I discount what she says. So if you want to hear more about what I had problems with this book, check out my Goodreads review. I don't want to rant and rave about the book on this video today. The next one I finished is also a nonfiction book for the BookTube Prize. So that's 3 BookTube Prize books this month, or this week. And that is I Like to Watch, which is Emily Nussbaum's book about arguing her way through the TV revolution. Nussbaum is a TV critic for The New Yorker. And this is really a collection of her essays over the last 10 or 12 years, talking about some of her favorite shows, some of her favorite directors. And the first 50 to 100 pages of this I really enjoyed. I thought, this is great. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't read about television. And so it was a nice break from some of the misery reading I've been doing. If you've seen my last couple of videos, I've read about some pretty dark topics. And then it kind of changes in character a little bit after about 100 pages. And a lot of people I've noticed on Goodreads who didn't like the book noted the same thing, that after the first couple of essays, she starts going off on some tangents that people just lost interest in. For me, the whole book started sounding too much the same. And as I got further and further into the book, I realized that she doesn't sound like a TV critic as much as she sounds like a groupie. She loves everything, especially if it's New York. She has a whole section on trying to justify her adulation of people like Woody Allen. And I'm sorry, you can't make Woody Allen look like a good person. It's just not possible. But she tries very hard to separate the work from the art because she doesn't want to give up on the art. That's fine. Just say that. Recognize that he's just a dismal human being, but you like some of the things that he's produced. Fine, whatever. But she starts to make these claims for different TV shows that are, I think, overblown. It's puffery. She wants to make every one of these TV shows, some of which were just unmitigated disasters. She tries to make them sound profound, as if we only saw it through her eyes, we'd understand how great a show it is. And I hate that condescension. I can dislike something and still have understood it. She actually spent one essay, and she mentions it in the essay, that there's a documentary that has a 32% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's pretty low, and yet she's still trying to convince us of how brilliant it is. She's got very obvious blinders on that if it's not New York and LA, she doesn't think it exists. And by the end of the book, I was just speed reading it. I was actually, the one thing that I found entertaining, sarcastically I guess, is that she's pretentious. And she uses the word auteur, or various forms of the word auteur, in almost every single essay. It got to the point where I was playing Where's Waldo with that word. Oh, there it is. I can move to the next essay now. And she works it in sometimes 2 or 3 times into a single essay when she's missed an essay and didn't use the word. It's her favorite word, and it's just pretentious. All it means is a director with a little style, but you know, it's French, so it must be intelligent. And I just got annoyed with the sameness of it all. And so by the end of the book, what started off as a high 4-star, maybe even a 5-star read, was hovering between 2 and 3 stars for me, because it's just more of the same. The crowning blow for me is that she's, a TV critic talking about all the important stuff on television. If she doesn't write a single thing, a single column about Game of Thrones, probably the most important, whether you like it or dislike it, the most important television event of the last 2 decades. She doesn't have a column in there about that at all. And I mentioned in my Goodreads review that that's kind of like writing a book about YA series fiction and completely ignoring Harry Potter. It just shows your biases. So that one was a fail for me at the end. And then the last book that I finished has taken me a long time. It's March of the Mammoths, and so I guess technically I could include this as part of March of the Mammoths because I finished it in March, but I read the most of it in February, and that is The Second World War by Antony Beevor. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I read fiction and nonfiction all the time about World War II. I just find it incredibly fascinating, and there's a passage that I quoted in my Goodreads review. I very rarely quote from books in my reviews, but there's a very short paragraph on his last couple of pages when he's wrapping up that explains why World War II has such a dominant place in our collective memories, even for those of us who weren't alive during the war. And this book is the definitive history of World War II. It starts with the Japanese invasion in Manchuria in 1931, carries all the way through to the post-war Potsdam Declaration and the settlements in 1945, and everything in between in extremely detailed writing. It's the version I have, the paperback version, not including the footnotes and the bibliography, is just under 800 pages, and it's small print on big pages. It's a 40-hour audiobook, and I did combination audio and text because I wanted help pronouncing so many of the German and French and Polish names, and the guy who does the reading does a really good job with those names, and so I did them together. And it is just long and detailed, but if you're ever interested in a genuine deep dive into the history of World War II, this is the place to start. But that's finished now. And so now that we're into March, I have another book that I've started that is my official March of the Mammoths entry, because I didn't start it until March 1st. And it is more than 800 pages, so it qualifies. And that is, of course, Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. Everybody knows about this book. I've started referring to it online just with 3 ducks emojis, and people know what book I'm talking about immediately, so it's everywhere. I'm 200 pages in of the 1,000 pages, and I don't think it needs 1,000 pages because it's doing the same things over and over and over again. But I am finding it interesting. I like how things start creeping into her thoughts in words and fragments that you don't know how they connect to things, and then later on she makes the connections for you, and so if you're paying attention, it answers those things. But once you've seen her do that 10 times, I'm not sure you need to see her do it another 80 times. So I have mixed feelings. I'm enjoying it, but I wish she had stopped at 250 pages instead of going on for 1,000 pages. Interestingly, the little interludes about the lioness, and I'm not sure I know why they're there yet, but I find them fascinating. So I've started Ducks Newburyport. That will take me 20 reading days to finish if it's 1,000 pages, because I read about 50 pages a day. So it's going to be with me for a couple more weeks. But then I've also started another nonfiction book from the BookTube Prize, which is Parkland by Dave Cullen. If you don't know Dave Cullen, he's the one who's well known for his book on Columbine. And he's kind of become known by the media as the mass shooter guy or the school shooting guy, which he does not like. But he understands why that has happened. I went into this book thinking it was going to be about the mass shooting, and in a way I'm really glad that it's not. It's not about the shooting as much as it is about the movement, the Never Again or March for Our Lives movement that grew out of the Parkland kids' activism. This book, because of where it happened, is really close to me personally. I was teaching in Broward County when that shooting happened. I had been at Stoneman Douglas High School that very week, earlier that week, for a debate tournament. One of my best friends in South Florida was at that time the debate coach at Stoneman Douglas, so he was there on the day. He's since gone on to law school and doesn't coach anymore, but now his replacement is another one of my good friends from years ago in the debate world. All my students at my school were friends with the students at Douglas because of debate or theater or whatever. And so even though Broward County is a pretty big county, the school community is not that big. Everybody knows each other. Ironic foreshadowing perhaps, but when we were there on the Saturday and Sunday for the debate tournament that was there the week before the shooting in February, there was a fire drill during the tournament, so we all had to evacuate over by the freshman building where the actual shooting took place. Somebody had burnt something in a microwave apparently, and it had set off the alarm. So this book is really hard not to throw back to that very day and the feelings that everybody was experiencing watching on the news. I don't know personally any of the children who were killed or the teachers who were killed. I know of one of the big activists because he was involved in the speech and debate world, David Hogg. But I don't have a close personal connection to any of the other people directly involved. It was just a communal feeling that went on in Broward County when it happened. And this book is really good. It's following their drive for organization, their drive for recovery, their drive for activism and trying to get politicians to do anything but give them thoughts and prayers, their drive to get politicians to listen to them without glazing over because they've heard it so many times before, they think. It's a really fascinating book, and so I think it's very well done. So I'm probably a little more than halfway through with that one. And then the one I just started yesterday is the 8th book in Louise Penny's Chief Inspector Gamache series. This one's called The Beautiful Mystery, which refers to Gregorian chant music in the church. I have thoroughly enjoyed the Louise Penny's books. I understand why some people get tired of them or don't take to them. I didn't take to the first one until I was halfway through it, but ever since then that series is accumulative in the sense that it refers to the stories that have already happened over and over again and builds on those characters. And I think some people don't like that because they don't like the constant references to previous books. That is part of what makes the series attractive to me. So I've just started that one. I think there are 15 or 16 currently out now. And so I've been reading one a month of those. And so I'm almost halfway through what's available now. So I have a good another 7 or 8 months before I have to go on the waiting list like everybody else for the next one that comes out. I found this one really interesting because the author's note at the beginning of this book talks about Louise Penny's life journey as well. And she's writing this as she turns 60. This was back in 2018, I believe. And I'm about to turn 60. And so reading it at the same time of my life that she was writing it and her life's journey, I just thought that was an interesting connection. Her life has been very different from mine, but it's still been an interesting connection. So that's what I've been reading. Oh, I meant to tell you about what I've been watching. Because of the first couple of essays in that Emily Nussbaum book about television, I started watching The Sopranos, a series I've known about forever, have heard about forever, but have never actually watched. And I'm hooked, I have to admit. It's really interesting. And so I'm still in the first season, and I know I have a long journey ahead of me on that one. But I was looking for something to watch, and so that came at a perfect time for me. I was hoping that her book would point me to a bunch of other series that I'd want to watch, but I started questioning her judgment after reading a couple of essays on series that I have read or have watched and didn't like. But The Sopranos, that's a win. So if nothing else, the book turned me on to watching The Sopranos, and I'm happy about that. All right, everybody, have a good weekend. I will talk to you again soon, and I hope you're all well. Bye, everybody.